And with that familiar intro, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode, another live episode of Candid Conversations about network marketing. I'm BK, and as usual, my co host, Dr. Wayne.
Hi, BK. Hi, everyone.
And if you notice that Dr. Wayne has a nice tan, it's because he has had some time on the boats, right?
Yes, it was absolutely brilliant. Very nice. Sailed before, but never actively sailed. So I learned a lot about ropes and different things. And it was absolutely fantastic sailing the Whitsundays. And we were quite lucky and unique in where we ended up in different coves because the trade winds normally in this particular area prevail from the southeast. But this time, for the time we were there, that we had northeast breezes, northerly to northeast, which meant we got into coves that you normally don't get into. And we just saw some incredible scenery and incredible, beautiful white beaches, that azure blue water with fish swimming through it. And it was just incredible, BK and everyone. It was just magnificent.
But I kind of remember that I did a bit of windsurfing in my younger days. I kind of remember that it doesn't matter where the wind blows, you kind of can adjust the sail to go in the direction you want, right?
Yeah, correct. And of course, it is better if it is
It
going.
favors the
Yeah.
which is why I mean we one of our favorite speakers always says it's not the the blowing of the wind, it's the set of your sail, right?
Yeah, yes, very, very, very true. So, which basically says exactly what you just said there. It doesn't matter which way the wind blows; it depends upon how we set our sail, and that's exactly the same with mindset, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, nice simple segue into our topic for today.
Very true. And our topic for today is why frequencies matter to achieve your heart's desire. So, we're going to dig deep into frequency and what it means and why it matters to achieve anything that you want within your life. Now, I always like to go through what we did the time prior, and we haven't had a session, a podcast, a screening for the last few weeks because of being away. But the last time we spoke, we talked about doing these two things will help 95% of network marketers succeed. Just doing these two things. And we delved deep into those two things. And therefore, we looked at the concept of why 95% of people, unfortunately, will fail network marketing or even entrepreneurial success when you don't understand what we went through. And we talked about why 5% will succeed. And remembering this is in any business, especially if you want to do be within a small business. You know, they say that after the first 5 years, around about 80 to 90% of small businesses fail. And we went deep into the cerebral cortex. We talked about 100 billion neurons are within this particular area of the body, and science suggests that only 10% are basically activated, 10 to 15%. So we have this gigantic network that we can then actually tap into, and we went into ways of being able to tap into this network. And we even went deeper, remember, BK, into making the brain is actually faster than any computer you can actually think of at this particular time, which is incredible. We went into the law of attraction, we went into the law of resistance, and that then we went into a number of steps that we could then take to improve everything about the two things that we could do to help us succeed. So now we want to move into is why frequencies matter to achieve your heart's desire. And before we get into that, one of the most important things that we talk about in any business, whether you're an entrepreneur going into any business or we're talking about network marketing specifically here, is that to know your avatar, to know your client, your ideal client, and who we are speaking to. So we get a lot of questions, and here are the burning questions that we believe is on everyone's network marketing lips. And these are the three questions that we get asked a lot. Why are others doing so well and I feel stuck in my network marketing business? Number two, why are others building their network marketing business easily without bugging their family, friends, and loved ones? And this one's really important. And the third question that we're often asked is, why are other people's teams actively recruiting like roaring lions? And unfortunately, my team seems to be asleep like sloths. These are the burning questions that BK and I will answer during this podcast today and when we have them weekly as well. So just going back to the title, Why Frequencies Matter to Achieve Your Heart's Desire. Now, it's really important to understand here that what we're talking about with frequency contains information. So if, for example, whatever your goal may be to rank advance, your goal may be to build a team, your goal may be to be a really good lead generation person. And because of those goals, then you'll have a set amount that you want to achieve to allow that to occur. So therefore, you want to have no mortgage, or you want to own your own car or get a new car, whatever that may be, even a holiday. So think of everything that we're talking about here also has frequencies. So we'll get into this deeper and deeper as we go through. But the main thing I want you to get to really understand here, no matter what you talk about, even the leaf of a tree has a frequency. The computer has a frequency. Your liver has a frequency. The food that you eat has a frequency. And each frequency then adds to a positive side of the equation or a negative side of the equation. So, for example, say you want to rank advanced to, and I'll just use the term diamond because a lot of network marketing companies have diamonds. So you want to get to diamond, and that basically now has a frequency. And say this frequency resonates at 50 megahertz or 50 hertz. The amount after it is irrelevant. But say it's at 50, that's the frequency that this particular goal is at. But say now your frequency is around about, say, 47, for example. And unfortunately, there's a disconnect. So you're at 47 and the goal is at 50, right? And because of this disconnect, what happens then is the actual goal then may not be achieved. Now, looking at the laws of the universe, remembering the law of abundance, the law of attraction basically states once you decide on what you want, so the first step in this process is deciding your goal, rank advanced to diamond. We know from the law of the universe, that once you set that, the law of abundance, the law of attraction has already given that to you, but it's given it to you in a frequency. And that frequency, as mentioned, might be at 50. However, because your frequency is lower than that, there's this disconnect, and that's why it's not given to you immediately. If the frequencies manage to be at the same hertz or megahertz, then immediately your goal, your wish, your desire is actually attained. And I'll give you an example of this in thought. So I'm sure many times you've had a thought that you should, you'd like to ring your mum or your dad, or you'd like to ring a friend. And within that instantaneous thought, your friend rings you. Now that is, yes, serendipitous and all the rest of it, but it's at a similar frequency, and that's why it occurs. So really, really important to understand this. If there's a disconnect, that's why step 3 doesn't occur in this process all the time, unfortunately. So when we understand that, then what we've got to do then is go, okay, if I'm at a frequency of 48 hertz, whatever it might be, megahertz, and I need to get up to 50, what do I need to do to allow that so there is no disconnect? So steps 1, 2, and 3 then occur. How does that sound, BK?
Yeah,
Make
I mean
sense?
it's kind of like what we have mentioned before, right? It's just a good reminder that it is kind of, I mean, for the way I easily understand this for myself is, for example, if you think of a radio station, and
Yeah,
if somebody is sending you a message on, say, 90.5, right? But you are at somewhere at 89, and as you are turning up the dial, you might be able to hear the message at 90.5, but it's just not very clear. But as you turn the
yeah,
dial closer and closer to 90.5, and when you hit 90.5, suddenly everything becomes crystal clear, right? So the idea that Dr. Wayne is trying to express here is that it, whatever you're trying to achieve, if you have already put it out into the universe, it has already been delivered to you. Meaning to say, for example, the station 90.5, which is your success station, is already transmitting. It's transmitting to you,
yeah,
right? It just
yeah.
so happens that your personal frequency dial on this body of yours, which is kind of like a radio station, you have not turned up the dial, right? And today, Dr. Wayne is going to show us how can we turn the dial towards 90.5, right?
Correct, correct. Yes, yes. So just to, I suppose, put this in a bit more of a backstory, just to go over a couple of things that we've spoken about. So remembering frequency translate into an information, and then once that information then is gathered, it then transfers into matter. And frequency is a language, really important to grasp as well. And every organ has a frequency, as mentioned. Every leaf, everything has a frequency that is at different vibrations. And for example, your liver has over 900 different frequencies. And if we can, I'll use, for example, it might be 1021 might be frequency number one, 1022 might be frequency number two, etc., etc. And your kidneys have over 1,000 different frequencies. And everything, as mentioned, has these different frequencies that's available to them. And the body and the mind communicates to each other via these frequencies. So, for example, your physical body is an emotional resonance of the way the mind interprets its reality. So, for example, if a snake comes into a room, probably 90% of people will try and get up on the table or run for their life because they unfortunately go into a fear response, fight and flight, with the cortisol response. And when that happens, that is a negative frequency that then unfortunately will actually drop a person's overall frequency, especially if that is now held as an emotional reality. And what happens now is that emotional reality now resonates in the physical body as a truth that we can't escape unless we do a few things that we'll go through towards the end. So once, and it's kind of, I don't know if you've heard of the story of the Pavlov's dog, for example, or there's many experiments like this, when you get a dog, for example, and you feed them food and you feed them food, and then what you do then is you add another item to that. You ring a bell, then you feed a food. You ring a bell, then you feed them food. You ring a bell, then you feed them food. You take away the food, then you ring a bell, and the dog salivates. And it's exactly the same thing with the human body. When we have a heightened emotion, a snake coming into the room, what it does then, it brings about a whole cortisol response of fear and flight, and we then flee the room. But if that fear and flight does not leave us, what happens then? We now have a memory that is in the physical body. And this is what I mean by how the body and the mind communicates with each other. And they communicate with each other via these frequencies. However, you've got other people like myself. If a snake comes into the room, I was grown up with snakes. I was taught to pick up snakes. I've picked up many, many snakes in my life. And the phenomenal thing is that I don't have a fear of them. So therefore, there is not a negative to me. And it's interesting. I come across so many people, and I play golf, or I go for walks in in forests and that type of stuff. And a lot of people will say, "Did you see that snake? I was only 10 meters in front of him. The snake ran in front of us." And I don't get to see very many snakes. Even when I go looking for people's balls, people will say, "Did you see that snake? Did you see that snake?" I don't get to see them, because what happens is I haven't got, remember the law of resistance states, whatever you don't want or don't like in your life, you'll actually attract that. So because people don't like snakes, they attract that into their life, which is unfortunately, not a very positive frequency. But if you haven't got that fear, then what happens is those snakes basically stay away, and it's like this dome of silence, or this dome that is around a person who hasn't got that resistance, that the snakes then don't enter, which is pretty incredible when you really grasp it. So this is how the mind and body communicate, and we hold on to these energies. Unfortunately, we hold more negative energies in our physical body than what we do otherwise. And each organ, from a ancient medicine perspective, looks at different emotions. So the liver looks after irritability, anxiety, depression. Another one would be the digestive system, looks after worry and low self-esteem, etc. So every organ, every tissue in the body has a relationship to these emotions. And this is, to these emotions. So this is what I mean by how the body and the mind communicate with each other, is via these frequencies. So snakes, BK.
You know, the interesting thing is, Doc, as you were talking about this, is kind of like, I guess something that sometimes we don't really think about it very much, but the universe speaks a very simple language in a
Yeah.
sense. So, for example, when you say, if you say a sentence, I want an apple, it kind of just picks up the word apple and then apple comes to you. But if you say, I don't want an apple, it also still picks up the word apple and gives you the apple,
Yeah.
because it doesn't recognize what is before the apple, right? It's just apple. You know, it just picks up the most important part of the word, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
recognize whether it's a positive want or you don't want something, right? So in a sense, that is not a language that it speaks in, which is exactly what Dr. Wayne was trying to express just now. When you think about a snake, whether you like a snake or you don't like a snake, you're thinking about snake. And to the universe, it interprets that as, oh, snake. Okay, there you go. No, this is snake. You know, maybe the reason why it's such a simple language is because the universe has to cater to a lot of people. And if it has to figure out whether it's positive or negative, it's a lot harder to send out the things to them. So it keeps it very simple. Apple, okay, apple. Snake, okay, snake. You know, whether it's one or the one, it doesn't really care in a sense.
And it's that's fascinating, that bit. I'll just like, because it's something that I used to teach to wellness practitioners and that as well, when I used to go around teaching that around Australia and New Zealand. There's something called TDS, something called transdiversional search. So we'll go back to Apple. So say, for example, I want you to think of an apple. So some people will think of a red apple, some people will think of a green apple, some people will think, oh, well, I really don't like apples. Some people will think of a apple with on top of maybe ice cream. So we all have these different concepts of apple. Okay, now when we understand a particular word, what happens is the reticular activation center in our brain really isn't activated. And what happens then is the brain then is able then to actually assess and understand the next lot of information that comes to us. And remember, this is frequency and information. So say, for example, if BK said to me, I want you to think of an apple, and the reason I want you to do that is because apples are good for me, and you have an apple a day, it keeps the doctor away, then I understood that whole set of, that whole paragraph, for example. However, if I then, because the transdiversional search of the brain isn't searching for any new bits of information. But if I said to you, I want you to think of the blueprint plans for the Apollo 11 and the way that it intercepts the information to get onto the computer screen, because this is important to understand what we're about to do. And I want you to remember the numbers 111, for example. Now, what happens now is the reactivation, the transdiversional search. The brain, unfortunately, now goes, it's still stuck back here. It's still stuck going blueprint, Apollo 11. don't know anything now, and it doesn't now it can't actually understand the rest of this information that was given to you, and you go, oh, was I supposed to remember 111? When did you talk about that? Even though we did talk about it, the brain actually now can't remember that. So when the brain basically goes into these, and the reason I'm bringing it up, because remember we're talking about information, we're talking about frequencies, is that when the information that comes in and it doesn't resonate with us, we still go into a bit of a fear and flight. The cortisol response comes in, not that it's very measurable, and the brain gets stuck back here. Okay, and this is why, for example, you can listen to the same piece of music or the same bit of same page or the same, or read a book a number of times, and you'll get more and more and more out of that book, because your reticular activation center basically then isn't aroused all the time, and your TDS is a lot easier, transdiversional search is a lot easier in understanding all this as well. So it's pretty incredible how all this works.
It's kind of like going on a trip. If you're trying to go from A to B, and along the way you get into an obstacle, you get lost. So you can't get to B. So the brain is like that. The brain is taking a trip from the start of the sentence to the end of the sentence. And if there is an obstacle in the middle, it has to get over it first. Otherwise, it won't be able to go all the way to the end of the sentence.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So now just to set in terms of where we are with these megahertz, and that just so you know, numbers, for example, for example, the brain frequencies ranges between 72 and 90 megahertz, and the normal brain is about 72. So if the more that brain frequency goes up, say to 80 to 85 to 90, this now is the genius, the person who can really do things extraordinary. And the normal brain frequency, as mentioned, sits at 72. The human body sits between 62 and 72 megahertz. And as mentioned before, everything contains these frequencies. And for example, fresh food has a frequency of about 20 to 27 hertz, not megahertz, hertz. Herbs, for example, have a frequency of about the same, 20 to 27. Dried foods between 15 and 22, and dried herbs between 15 and 22. But anything that is processed or canned, that you basically have to tear to get the food out of, processed food, canned food, has 0 hertz. So say, for example, just giving you an example now, you've got someone now who wants to become a diamond, right? Let's put this into practical understanding. And we'll just really make this particular person out to be not very healthy, okay, in mind and body. So we'll talk about the body first. So this particular person always eats processed food. So for breakfast, for example, it'll be something that comes out of a box, and then it's basically homogenized milk with raw sugar, and then it's white bread as a piece of toast with some margarine. Now, all of that to me is all synthetic food. So say, for example, we might get 5 hertz out of that, and that's being generous probably. And lunch is basically the same. It's something that's been delivered to them in a sterilized package, for example, out of the fridge, and they put it in the microwave, which unfortunately zaps all food. The hertz then just goes down to 0 immediately. Has a cup of coffee and tea with that, and then the evening meal then is say some ham or some processed meats. With doesn't like vegetables, so it's just processed meats with some processed cheese, and after that will be a bar of chocolate. Now, during that day, and if this is a frequent event of food, and I have met people, and this is their diet, so don't think it's out of the norm. I've met many people, and that is their diet. Unfortunately, in the frequency world, it's 0. Okay, so unfortunately they haven't. So say they're sitting at, using that example before, the goal is at 50 hertz and they're sitting at 47, 48. There's this disconnect. What they've just done during the day, unfortunately, with food to allow their body to actually be nourished, has got 0 hertz. So step one. Now what happens is this person now unfortunately lives in the past. So this person is woe is me, always talks about the person's health, always talks about the negative things that happens in the person's life. Even when that person is not talking, 80 to 90% of the time, the mind is always in the past. It's not thinking of the future in terms of a positive way. Even if the person does think of the future, it's in a negative way. When the person wakes up from sleep, always thinking about what it's got to do and how I've got to basically fix this or do that, etc. And unfortunately, you might only get another 10 or 20 hertz that may be a positive to that particular person. Now, what happens now is when all this enters the physical body and we're processing all this, it might actually, because we have to use energy and frequency as energy as well, then because it transfers into matter, then what happens is this person may need, now I'm just going to make this up, I've got no idea, I haven't come across anything that allows me to explain this any other way than just a um, uh, 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 unknowingly. So I'll put it that way. So say, for example, the body actually needs around about, say, 5,000 hertz to have a positive response in rebuilding the body. But what I've just said then is this particular person may have had only a 30 or 50 positive hertz response for that day. So what happens now is if we subtract those two apart, there's a huge loss. So what happens now is this person who may have been at 48 hertz, for example, now comes down to 47 hertz. And each day this person actually goes down. Even though they still want to become diamond, what they're doing is they're not actually doing the things to allow that particular person to attain their goal. So everything we do can be translated this way. And it's when you really understand this, it then makes sense why something like 95% of people don't end up achieving what they really wanted to achieve in their life. But if we can really understand this and then do the things necessary to help us to move forward in this, it can change everything.
Yeah, it's actually very fascinating because I mean, if you read books or memoirs, biographies of very successful people, for example, um, more often than not, you will find that they typically take very good care of their physical health.
Yes,
They are typically very conscious of the things they eat. They are conscious of putting in exercise for themselves on a daily or weekly basis. They are very conscious of the quality of their sleep, and they do things like meditation and so on. So, in a sense, it's kind of like, and as Dr. Wayne was trying to explain just now, I'm not sure whether these days we are all streaming music, for example. But if you remember when the days when you have a CD, right, or even a record, right, a CD, when you pick up a CD, you're always very careful not to touch the shiny side of the CD, because sometimes you notice if you get oil, fingerprint oil and smudges and grease and all kinds of things on the surface that is supposed to be the information, and you put it onto your player, it doesn't sound as good as when you have a very clean CD, right?
yeah,
Because then the laser is able to pick it up properly. That's exactly the same as us, right? Because when you put in whether is it you don't sleep well or you don't eat well or you all those things, and then you kind of like you're adding smudges and grease and grime onto your body, therefore it cannot receive the information properly, right?
correct. Yes. And there's an ancient quote that goes something like, the law of the universe won't, the light of the universe won't enter the physical body if the body is impure. So this is why it's so important to really work on the physical body. So just to have some reference points when we're talking about the body, for example, colds and flu, they will start to enter the body at 57 to 60 hertz. So if the body is lower than this, of course, viruses and bacteria enter the body easily. And remembering, for the healthy body, the body needs to be resonating at 62 to 72 megahertz. So anywhere from 60 down is where these colds and viruses and bacteria, etc., enter. Also, disease starts at around about 58 megahertz. Candida or yeast overgrowth starts at 55 megahertz. And as you notice, the scale is slowly going down. Receptive to different things like glandular fever, things like Ross River fever, cytomegalovirus, dengue fever, etc. It's around about 52 megahertz. And then receptive to cancer is around about 42 megahertz. And when the body's frequency actually keeps on going down, death begins at around about 25 megahertz. So the more things that we can do to allow our frequencies to basically vibrate at a more faster rate, the more that we have greater health. And just of interest, the frequencies that create, that allow us to create, allow us to manifest things is at 500 hertz. So the more that we can hold the emotion, an elevated emotion of gratitude, an elevated emotion of being grateful, then what happens is the longer we can hold that, and we can hold that at 500 hertz, then what happens is manifestation then can occur, where we can then actually create, or our goals then are then realized. So that goal of getting to diamond then all of a sudden just happens. And I'm sure that you have all heard of people who have got to diamond in a relatively short time, in 8 weeks and 10 weeks, in very, very short periods of time, because everything aligned with that particular person at that particular time. Okay, so anything to come in there, BK?
All good.
No? Yep. All good? Okay. So just going over the main theme here is that everything has a frequency, and what happens then is our frequency then determines where or how our goals, or how quickly our goals are achieved. The more there's a disconnect between your goals frequency and your frequency, the longer it will take to be achieved, or for some people, the goal is never achieved because there is this huge disconnect. So the question then is, okay, what can we do to allow us to improve our frequency? And of course, the first thing to do is look at your physical body. Look at what goes into your mouth. Make sure the best you can. Try and get organic. Don't get dead food. Get live food. Try and do that the best you can. If you want to go to another level, go and seek professional help that will actually help you to do that better. That's step one. And in the physical body is to have good night's sleep as well. And within the physical body, the next one then is exercise. Exercise is really important for this as well. Now we'll go to the mind. The most important thing with the mind now is, every now and again, is to ask yourself, what am I thinking about? This is a really important question to ask yourself, because what happens is when you first start out on this journey, you will be amazed at, unfortunately, how often you're thinking about the past, or the way the past has influenced you, or what you can do in the future to get away from your past, which is still kind of a negative if you're thinking about it in terms of getting away from your past. If you're trying to create a future whereby that thought isn't there, that's what we want. That's the one that we want. So, of course, the other one then is meditation, sitting still for 10 to 20 minutes, even if the brain is winning, even if the conscious brain is winning, meaning that your brain is going here and there with all these thoughts, don't worry about that. Just sitting still for that 10 to 20 minutes after a period of time. It might be 1 month for some, it might be 1 day for some, it might be a month for others, it might be 2 months, 3 months, some people might be 6 months. But by doing that alone, you will eventually get to a state whereby you will be able to allow your brain to settle. Now, once you allow your brain to settle, the next most important thing, and I like the word gratitude, is allowing yourself to feel gratitude through your whole body, where you can get tears and tingles up and down your spine. That's the state. Remember, I mentioned Pavlov's dog. If I'm in a meditative state, whenever I think of gratitude, that's what literally then happens to myself. You can get this automatic response of just feeling happy and joyous and in gratitude, whereby it sends tingles up and down your spine. It's an unbelievable, fantastic feeling. So they're probably some of the major things that we can do to help with this elevation of our frequencies, so that then we can actually match our frequency and so that we can match the goal's frequency. So that's the major goal, or the major thing that I'm wishing to get across here, is that importance of understanding that if your goal is not being achieved, it's because there's a mismatch between the frequency of your goal and yourself. Now, what can we do to allow our frequency to be elevated to the same frequency of our goal? And this is why frequencies matter, and they matter especially if you want to achieve any one of your heart's desire. Why frequencies matter to achieve your heart's desire. So important information, and hopefully, and the same with anything, isn't it, BK? For those people who just listen and don't do, there will be a disconnect. For those people who listen and do, then what happens is then you'll start moving your own frequencies up towards your goals frequencies.
There is a phrase that goes like this: you should dial it up a notch, right? And that quite literally means what we are talking about today. So, the things that Dr. Wayne has been sharing just now are things that can help you literally dial it up a notch, right? So that you're closer to the frequency that you need to be at in order to receive the goals that you have set for yourself, right? Whether is it a financial goal, a career goal, a personal goal, a life goal, a happiness goal, all those things are actually all operating on the same kind of principles, right? So I think if you want some of the things, if you've not been able to write down the items that Dr. Wayne was sharing just now, please do check us out at our website, because we do have show notes for you, so you can actually just refer to them if you can't remember all the things that we have mentioned to help you dial it up a notch, right? So you can find our archive episodes at networkmarketerpodcast.com. If you're watching this live right now, it's just below me, networkmarketerpodcast.com. And also, if you do really want to dive right into the more the spiritual laws that Dr. Wayne mentioned, along the course of this live stream, things like the law of abundance, the law of attraction, the law of resistance, then you might want to head out to numerical number 5. That's the numerical number 5, 5hiddenreasons.com. So I think that nicely wraps up another live stream for us today. Dr. Wayne, anything to leave the audience with?
No, I think we covered it nicely, and it was a deep dive, and hopefully by doing, you will then achieve.
So we will see you when we see you. Thank you, Dr. Wayne.
Thanks, BK. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.